you said.
Yep, I looked at them. Well, in our high school, a lot of people would, I guess they'd take their tractors and it wasn't nice.
All right, we are live. Let me send everybody the link here.
Big, nice, and close ones. Golly, that's
And let's see.
really trusted me taking that expensive of equipment to school. So,
Well, the ones that are probably taking it drive it too. You know,
Yeah.
they're out there in the fields driving that. So, or otherwise they wouldn't be probably, more than likely.
Yeah, I was just comparing it to my high school to here, and I'm glad they still do it. I remember it was like 20 old tractors, and people have their stories getting up at like 4 in the morning to start driving because they live 20 minutes away, or 20 miles away or whatever, so.
Right.
Oh. Be cold doing that, open cabin.
Yeah, they all used to be like that, didn't they, Paul? They all used to be open cab, didn't they?
Didn't know any different.
Yeah.
Fortunate to have an umbrella.
You didn't have a choice.
First time I went inside a cab one was turnout, and there's a radio inside, there's 2 seats with cushions and air springs on it. I'm like,
Clarence is moved.
I thought y'all were roughing it this spring.
moved to Clarence.
Commission inside and everything.
Yeah, they have a dinner.
I was like, yeah, ours doesn't have a TV, some have TVs, and I'm like, you're pulling my legs. Oh, really?
All righty. Let's get you so you can see everybody here,
Yeah, that's what they have.
or at least
Don't
most
drive.
everybody.
Going along, they just had to make the turns.
They're still cleaning up, so don't be alarmed. All right.
Make sure it doesn't get too full. So.
Seat in? I just wanted to show you, this is what we had at the conference Sunday. That's what the girls had to recite after them. Just so you know. The girls had to recite that after the speaker, that's what, no, the fashion show. Christine had done the fashion show.
Larry's going out there and stuff.
I'll carry this. Just go in the back seat. Okay.
Can I get that, Linda?
We're on the
I just wanna
last
hold
year.
the cool one.
Oh, okay.
You sure? I just wanna take this thing. All right.
Did you see this?
Anything else I can grab? Oh, good. Well, I'm glad I got the hold for that.
Karen, I'll put this by your desk, by your chair. Just put the girls beside it Sunday. For the fashion show, at the fashion show. Oh, okay. I wanted you to see this.
You're welcome anytime. We enjoy ourselves every week.
He's stressed.
Do you read it?
All the good news is I don't have a future, but it's not hybrid. It's right straight to the point, which is good.
No, but you gotta to critique the husband.
Yes, yes.
I gotta tell you something funny.
Be selective.
Amy Coleman told me this. Elizabeth, you know, their oldest daughter? Okay. She was, I don't know what brought the subject up, but she was talking about her friend at school is a boy. And so he wants to come to her and see her, you know? Well, this is a fight, you know, we're in kindergarten. So Brian told her, if he wants to come and see you, he's got to spend a day with me on the farm. So she went back and says, you can't come and see me unless you come and spend a day with my dad on the farm. Amy said, that's one of the rules that Brian has told the girls that's going to happen when they get older and they want to bring their boyfriends home. And then Amy was telling me this story about when she, I don't know if you knew Amy before she came to Callio, but I knew her growing up because she went to the same high school as our son. They were in 4-H and they raised hogs. Her dad and mom, I can't think of their name now. Anyway, Susie and Richard. Marsh. And so this guy Megan asked her to out on a date. Well, when he came out, she had to help get the hogs in. So she was in her stinky boots and, mud all over. And she said, so he came up there and my dad came over and said, so what are you doing here? And Amy says, well, he came to take me out tonight. And he said, you didn't ask for my permission if you could take my daughter out.
Yeah.
She said, he never showed up again.
That's funny.
I thought that was hilarious.
That's great.
I guess that's a benefit of having a girl.
It happened to me.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, I was one of 4 girls.
Yeah.
Oh, Daddy meet him at the door and says, so, what do you have intention for tonight?
It's a smart question.
Obviously, I didn't have very many dates.
There's some parents that have this same form filled out. It's essentially, bottom line was like, whatever you do with my daughter, I'm doing with you. Like the dad was
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And there's like one of them, the dad posted a picture, is like prom pictures, and the guy was behind the girl holding them that picture, and so the dad got behind and the kid got
I would so do that. You can't embarrass me. Like, no problem. I can do it. Yeah, that's great. Oh, boy. Good times.
Just so, in case you care, this was the rating system. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, the feedback form. Yep.
They handed that out at the meal time, I think, right before, or, yeah, right,
Yep.
at the meal. Because they all had, at the tables, they could write.
Mhm.
And I know we passed out, I think we passed out pencils. Somewhere we passed out, or we passed out pencils for the speaker too.
My only suggestion to Melanie was do it after they eat. Like, right after they eat, they'll be in a better mood.
Yeah.
Because the meal started late and everybody was hungry. I might have eaten the piece of paper. I don't know.
Oh, they do it beforehand?
Well, and some of them, I think, you lose them too.
Right.
Because it is getting later and they,
Oh, I do. I zone out. All I can think about is how hungry I am.
After I eat, I'm great.
Right. Yeah.
Happy.
You always want to give people a survey when they're in a good mood. They're more objective in a good
Right,
mood. In a bad mood, everybody's ready to complain about everything. Yeah. Yep.
And when I'm hungry, even more so.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's all good.
Yep.
We keep trying.
Yep. It's a noble cause.
And you just keep, you listen to all the complaints and whatever.
That's why.
Yep.
People don't like things. They don't like you.
See y'all
It's okay to
later.
get over it.
All
You
right.
didn't
Have
have
a
any
good one.
complaints, I'd be concerned.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Karen.
Bye, Karen.
Take care.
See you later.
Have fun in Brookfield.
Oh, we will.
Don't buy much at Walmart.
That's really.
Good times. All right. Well, just so you know, Virgil and Irma are directly behind us, so.
Hi.
She'll think she's got.
Well, I want Virgil to hear me.
Says you're a pain.
Well, Josh, my dad decided to go ahead and buy a new computer.
Okay.
Someone finally was honest with him, told him the hard drive thing wasn't the solution, something else was it, so he went and ordered one. So, brand new Mac.
Oh. Oh, it's not a computer. It's a calculator that's overpriced. Oh. Well, tell him I'm sorry. I'll send him a sympathy card.
You should, that would be really fun.
I have.
I heard you on that.
In high school, we had a program on Macs in computer class, and so we had a ritual where every time after class we'd go and wash our hands together as a group, ceremonially remove the filth of the Mac.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Must be cheap, that's why it's schools bought
I don't. Yeah.
It's been on sale or something.
it. Every school had it.
Which is ironic considering that businesses never adopted them. So see, that was the whole plan was, well, get them in the schools, then they'll want them in the businesses, and that didn't work out. Now they're doing these Chromebooks, which are worthless, and putting them in the students' hands, and guess what business doesn't use? Chromebooks. You want to train people to use computers, teach them Windows. That's what the world uses. So the Catholic school actually called me over the summer last year and said, what should we use? And I said, definitely Windows PCs. That's what is used in business. Everything else is a waste of time. And I'm not saying anything about the quality of the other systems, but like if you're training somebody to drive a truck, like a semi, you don't put them in a Ranger. You put them in the real thing, you know? Just because it has a steering wheel and a stick shift doesn't mean it's the same thing. Yeah,
I went to a driving school and all I had was a Ranger.
that's all I have now. But nobody tells me to drive a semi, I can tell you that.
There's a 4 or 6 cylinder
4.
stick shift.
Yep,
On the panel or on the floor?
it's on the floor.
I had so much trouble with my
Did you?
transmission. But everybody whose dog drove it would come out here hunting, and some guys would rip it up to about 4,000 RPM with it shifted. And
Josh drives
all-
really easy.
Jake and Wesley both learned how to drive.
My mechanic tells me I've never worn out a car. I'm so slow because of my vertigo.
Floyd bought a big truck and he told Jake to drive it home. Of course, he drove it home. He says, when did you learn to drive a straight stick? Well, Grandpa had one. Boy said, that's right.
My Fiesta's a stick shift. I love a stick shift. I think we're almost ready. Getting the very last few things packaged up there. We also folded newsletters today, but we email most of them now, so we don't need to spend a whole session doing it anymore.
Bill's still getting his tin to fold in the mail.
Is he?
Yeah, the rest of it.
Bill needs to get his email address, send his, because he's got one.
Okay, okay. Bill, call Lisa and give her your email address. That's instructions according to Virgil. And Alex says he'll send you 10 of them to fold, okay? All right.
Bella gets a pass today.
Oh, Velda gets a pass. That's according to Alex. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just the messenger. All right. Well, believe it or not, we're on the last chapter of 1 Thessalonians.
Are we going to 2 Thessalonians next?
Yep.
All right.
I think we got through this book faster than any other book ever.
It's a little smaller.
It's very practical.
You have handouts?
I don't.
Did you come last week? It was a little handout.
Yeah.
Good.
It was really simple. I really worked on that.
Frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told you I wanted to pull the grown one,
I had a
the adult edition.
the professional author told me one time, you know you're getting to be a decent writer when you write less.
He'd be a good writer, because I write very well.
That's what I was thinking.
What she meant was you discard most of what you write.
Very little to what compared to what?
Compared to, like, for example, when I write a sermon, it'll be like 20 pages long. I pare it down to about 6. So, yeah.
But you gotta let your thoughts in first and
Yep.
realize, oh, that was a terrible.
2/3 or it's just not interesting enough to include. Or,
Deleted all once.
Oh, yeah.
No.
oh, I've done that.
2
I've done that on a
hours.
Saturday night where I just hit delete. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. It's happened. Or I'll wake up at 2 in the morning on Sunday and be like, oh no.
Yeah.
Didn't occur to me until then.
Jacob Landcourt was telling me one of his buddies called him on a Saturday night. It's like, hey, can you preach for me Sunday morning? And so he's like, yeah, I can do that. So he worked from like 8 to 12 working on a sermon. He worked the whole day beforehand. So he worked all that for a sermon. Then he completed it all and started again in another 4 hours. Finally got a sermon.
It's funny. There are weeks where it's 6 to 8 hours and other weeks where it's 20 to 30. It's just hard to tell. I find stories are easier than other things in general. Just easier to preach through. Well, I'm gonna get more tea since we're still waiting.
I tried to get help them, but they said, no, they didn't need more help, so I came here.
You gonna go tell him? You're a little bold today, not that bold.
Okay. Sorry for my hair.
I gotta get my haircut.
Yeah.
At least you got some.
I woke up and the day was busy from the second I got out of bed and never had a chance. So the hat it was.
I'm back in the same place again.
Yeah. And nobody's mentioned a turkey or pantyhose yet or anything. I tell you.
Can't you imagine what anybody different listen?
Welcome to Daytimers. We haven't had a good rabbit hole in a while. If anybody thinks of one.
We'll see where the lesson goes. Might think of something.
Yeah, I shouldn't give you that challenge.
If we get past the first word, I'll be surprised.
Uh,
Now.
I'm doing really good with this.
Nope, I'm
I
good.
drank enough this morning.
Sorry.
You're fine.
What's an epoch?
It's a period of time.
Oh, what? Oh,
Epoch.
what?
Oh, there's on the
Somebody
first
said
verse.
beatbox.
Beatbox, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they ain't that in the Bible.
Give me an example of
It
it.
mixed emotions.
It's all right, Shirley.
A huffing and a puffing.
Relax. We can take your time. No big deal. All right, we're in 1 Thessalonians 5, which is exciting because it's the last chapter of the book, and we've moved through this book pretty quick. Even with the weather and everything, I'd say, 2 or 3 months? Not too bad for me. That's pretty amazing. So grateful for that. Well, I think you're going to find this to be really enlightening. In fact, in relation to current events, it's very enlightening. So let's start reading. Let's do verses 1 and 2. Anybody willing to read?
Now as to the times and the epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you. For you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I'm sure you're amazed as much as I'm amazed how often somebody out there, whether it's on the news or the media or a newspaper or radio or on the internet or wherever, who says, I know when Jesus is coming back.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new one that it's July of this year.
Oh, okay. Well, that's,
I'll tell you more about them later.
you know what I know about that then? I know for sure it's not going to happen that day, whatever they say. Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this, come like a thief in the night. Has anybody, and I don't want to traumatize anybody or make anybody live any bad memories, but does anybody have any experience with having anything stolen from them? You do? Okay. Can you give me like a real quick synopsis?
Well, they broke in and ransacked the house.
Wow. So that must have been
They took the
terrifying.
pillowcases off the pillows.
What?
Pillowcases?
They took the pillowcases off the pillows
They
and
know what they're doing.
filled them with meat from the freezer. And
Oh
then they
my.
took, then they took, this is my parents' house when I was still home, so this happened a long time ago. And they took the antique clock, Grandpa, it was on the mantle. They took other antique they knew was there. I think they knew that it was there. That's what we surmised, because they had to know there was a freezer full of meat. That's just the way we
They
lived.
weren't there.
Daddy and mother, they raised everything, so there was always
Right.
replenished.
Right.
Silverware, they took silverware.
Sure.
They took, anything with gold trim on it. Some bases and things like that on the ledges around the, back then we had ledges around the walls and they had bases and plates on there and
Okay.
Where are we at?
So, 1 Thessalonians 5.
Oh, 5. Ours was when we were here for Christmas in 86. And our house was burglarized in Arizona, and same thing. Well, they took the pillowcase off the bed and took my jewelry, Avon and Good, but mostly Avon. And you don't feel safe in your own home then.
Right.
You feel very violated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So,
It took a long time to feel comfortable sleeping again in that house, you know,
Was your house locked?
yes. And we had a watchdog,
I
a
kicked
German
our front
Shepherd,
door.
and they mazed it. Well,
wow.
that's the only way we could think, because he wouldn't let, I mean, anybody else that came up there, he was like at their door, you know,
Right.
the car door before they got out, snarling. So we know they had to do something to him, unless they knew the person.
Right. And oftentimes thievery is somebody you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is crazy to
And
think
see, the
about.
weirdest thing of it was, that was when Daddy worked nights. So it was just us girls, mother there.
You were at home when it happened? Oh, my goodness.
We were sleeping upstairs, of course, see.
Oh my, you were there when,
That's nuts.
but you all slept through it?
Well, we heard a lot of commotion, but by the time we heard it, because the dog didn't bark or anything,
Oh, yeah.
you gotta understand, this was a big house. I mean, we're talking a big
Mhm.
house. And so when you're upstairs, you couldn't hear what was going on downstairs. You just couldn't. That's just the way it was. And no, we didn't. But thank God we didn't, because
You probably would have been hurt.
you don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
we were just thankful nobody was hurt. That's the main thing. Nobody was hurt.
Right.
And, you know, if they want those things, I guess it's more important to you than it was to us. But anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
Were they caught?
no, I don't think so. I don't ever remember him being caught. Like I said, it was a long time ago. I can remember the trauma of that, you know, so.
Yeah, being unsafe in your own home, not feeling
Yeah.
secure
Yeah.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go on.
No, I wanted
No.
to ask and see if anybody would tell a story, because I think that's what puts this in context. You can theorize what it's like to have a thief come in the night or a thief come at all, but once you've experienced it, this takes on a whole new meaning.
Amen.
It really does. My parents' house was not stolen from, but our garage was. Took a lot of valuable tools and things like that. But what I remember from childhood isn't our house being stolen, it was being shot at.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Growing up, we grew up in central Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. Now that doesn't sound like a scary town, but it's a big enough town, and there's plenty of crime and there's plenty of things going on.
Depends on what section of town you're in.
Yeah. And I remember one shooting in particular that happened was, it was broad daylight, and this Ford Bronco was going down the road, and he was just shooting everybody and everything. Didn't matter what was going on.
Mm.
And to my knowledge, nobody got killed, but there were bullet holes everywhere in our house and everything. And I remember, I think I was 10, 12, something, and remember hearing the sounds, and it was summertime, so I thought somebody was doing fireworks. So I was going to go outside and watch, and oh no, it was not fireworks. And my dad recognized the sound because he'd been in the military and knew that. I had never been around guns, so I didn't know better. And so he got us all downstairs in a hurry. But that's what I remember. Now, that's not the same thing as a thief in the night, but it's still something traumatic and unexpected.
Yeah, it's an invasion of your home.
Yeah, makes you feel
property,
insecure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's so interesting that multiple times, multiple authors in the New Testament use this illustration that Christ coming back is going to be like a thief in the night. That's really a picture. Something unexpected and traumatic. And again, these people that make these declarations about when the second coming is going to happen, I don't think they've experienced this. Because once you have, you would never forget this. And you would never take it for granted. And you certainly wouldn't dismiss it. I mean, if any of us knew when a thief was coming, that would change everything,
Guns.
right? But the whole point of a thief coming in the night is you don't know. And not only do you not know, but you weren't even in the mindset for it to happen. So when it happens, not only were you not expecting the thief, you're dealing with emotions and insecurities you never had before. And to some degree, you live with them forever. Like my kids are always complaining about how I'm locking the doors in the house. That's because of where I grew up and what I experienced. Like Jonathan, he gets so annoyed how I lock the back door in the middle of the day. And he walked out of it 5 seconds later, I locked it and he can't get back in. So I've been trying to not lock it during the day, but it's still hard to do. I lock my car. If people want to leave something in my car during church or something, and I always lock my car. It's just, 20 years of programming.
I'm like you. I lock everything. Nicole gets so mad. Grandma, why are you locking this door? Because if I sit down, I might take a nap, and I don't know who's coming and going.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent like 15 years almost in Aurora, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Like, you don't think these,
Mhm.
it's only a town of 120,000, but there's plenty wrong going. In fact, the day I left for college, I walked out my parents' door to get in my car to drive to college. All my windows were busted out.
Oh my goodness.
That was my growing up.
Yeah.
I was used to something destructive happening somewhere all the time. Went to a high school of 1,600 students. I remember the year that they banned glass bottles because somebody broke a glass bottle across somebody else's head. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, there was always some kind of violence, some kind of trauma going on. And so sometimes people wonder why I'm a little jumpy. Well, it's just the way you grow up. So around here, my children have enjoyed such peace and calm that I try to introduce them, inoculate them a little bit into the evil of the world, because it's like, you need to realize the world is not like the way you grew up. What you think is unfair and unkind is nowhere near what you will experience as an adult. And the New Testament church certainly didn't have it easy, did it? We've been reading about how this church was under persecution, and Paul twice in this letter says, I couldn't take it anymore. That's really a statement by the Apostle Paul. So there's lots of traumatic language here to let us know the gravity of what they were dealing with.
Jim Franklin not only leaves the car open, he leaves the keys in it.
Yeah,
Oh no.
there are people who do that.
He's from Chicago. I can't imagine
I
doing
can't
that.
either.
No.
we're not.
No, but don't they say that if your keys are in the car and it's stolen, your insurance isn't any good?
Maybe not. I don't know.
I've heard that. I don't know that.
What'd you
it's
say,
true,
Larry?
but I've heard it.
If I lived by a penitentiary, I'd leave my keys in the car.
Yeah, then they'll
You get out of there.
and leave you alone.
Kara works at the prison in Moberly, and they have to, if you do not lock your car, you can get written up. They actually have people that go around and lock
Periodically.
and check and lock the cars because they do not want an inmate getting one and running off with it, which they've had happen.
I worked for the state for 45 years and I always lock my car.
Yeah.
I trust straight orders.
Okay, you want to hear a funny story?
Mhm.
I worked at the Illinois Division of Aeronautics as a teenager. That sounds really fancy, but I just washed airplanes, okay? And one time the governor, George Ryan, opened the door for me to walk through. And I thought that was really cool. And then like 2 weeks later, he's in prison.
Yeah.
So,
He was
Pardon
open.
that
He
guy the
goes
other
it.
day, that's the first one in 5 years, or so many years that
Yep.
they've had a governor in prison.
yep. And to give you an idea of the atmosphere of Illinois, like it's just one state over, right? It's a whole different universe than Missouri. It took me years to get used to you people. I mean that. It did. You're so nice and you actually mean it. Like back home, if somebody's nice to you, you think they're trying to hustle you. You don't wave hi to strangers. You don't look people in the eye. You're not kind to, because you don't know who's out to get you. Around here, people are actually nice.
He used to would get upset when I wouldn't leave the key in the car. He wanted it there, so if he needed to run someplace or the truck or whatever it was, where's the key at? He wanted it so he could go immediately. He didn't
And
want-
so yeah,
He
it's just
wanted it left there all the time.
it's a whole different
I always
universe.
had my keys and stuff in the
One
car.
thing he told me when I went to Chicago is never make eye contact when you want to cross the street.
No,
Mm-mm.
don't.
Why across the street?
Huh?
Why across the street?
Well, if you want to cross the street, go at a stop sign, never make contact with the guy, because he's gonna get you. He's gonna go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
He's gonna bluff you out.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't
No.
Speak to people.
You don't
speak,
speak
you
to
always still pay attention to the lie.
Right.
You know,
Oh, you don't. I remember working at Hardee's in fast food, and you didn't make friends with your coworkers. You didn't know who they were. You just did your job. So it's a whole different universe. And so when I first moved here, I was really a jerk to some people because they were nice to me, and I thought they were trying to hustle me. And it took me years to understand that they were actually nice. And I had one couple I really upset and didn't know it until many years later. They're actually a relative of somebody who attends here. And when I finally came to understand that you all weren't hustlers, I wrote a letter to them, and on the outside of the letter I wrote, "I'm sorry," and kind of spelled out my apology. And they came to my store and told me they accepted it and they understood. And I said, I'm sorry. And then now I'm the one that goes home and I'm waving at strangers, and my family's like, "Stop that!" Because you get used to wherever you live. I've been here longer than I was a kid in Missouri and Illinois at this point. Yeah, I've been here almost 20 years, so yeah, I've kind of crossed that line. So this is home now. And anyway, kind of taking it back to this is after you experience something like this, you have a different perspective. So I think those silly people that want to say they know when Christ is coming, I bet they've never had something stolen from them. I bet they haven't experienced this kind of trauma or persecution. Because once you have, you would never take this lightly. You would always take it seriously. And I think that's important to recognize. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts on that before we move on? This next one I think will really hit you. Just verse 3.
while they are saying, peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly like birth pangs upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape.
Whew. Yeah, think about that. I mean, Paul's really using some strong language here, and continues to use interesting illustrations. This idea that destruction will come upon you like birth pains of a woman with child. Now, it's interesting he uses that illustration as a man, first of all. In today's culture, we would call that mansplaining. How dare Paul, As you can-
Unmarried man.
Right, yeah. But God inspired his word, so apparently God's okay with it. But beyond that point, I was thinking about this peace and safety. Boy, don't you hear that, at least by innuendo, all the time? Like, oh, our borders are secure. Oh, we're not going to get the coronavirus. Oh, everything's fine. The world is at peace. We're all safe. And you know what?
Wake up.
They were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day the floods came. That's how Jesus put it. And I've memorized that verse because, sudden tragic things happen on a regular basis, really. Things you weren't expecting, things that you certainly didn't want to have happen. And it has this kind of suddenness to it. Now, it's interesting, again, he uses this illustration of a pregnant woman, because at least a pregnant woman knows what?
She's pregnant.
She's pregnant. She's going to give birth at some point. Yeah, you might have at least some estimation. Now compare that to the previous illustration, a thief in the night. You have no idea when it's coming. With a birth, you can't pinpoint it, but you have some window of when it might occur. So, it's a little different of a perspective. But I think the emphasis here is on the suddenness of it. Otherwise, once it's here, you can't stop it. Even today, I was just thinking of the words and I lost it. When a woman breaks her water. Well, guess what? Baby's coming. Even with all our science and technology, there's no stopping nature. It's coming. And so, look at that last part of the verse. They shall not escape. Something I constantly emphasize to my children is stop believing people's promises. And I know that's a horrible thing to say to some degree, but if your teenage friend tells you, "Oh, I'm going to do this for you," don't build your hopes up. and it applies to adults too. Like, you really have to trust somebody to believe somebody's promise, don't you? Like, with age, you don't trust strangers' promises. They might come through, but they also may not. You don't hope for it. You just kind of see what'll happen. I think it's funny, every 4 years we have this election where we set up some man as God and believe what he actually says is going to happen. Some get closer than others, but in general, it's a man and it's a government, and there's never going to be promise keeping like God keeps promises, is my point. Best case scenario, you get a partial fulfillment.
You're not gonna get peace and safety.
And then there are other times where they promise things you really hope won't happen. Some of them right now are promising things where I'm like, I sure hope you break that promise. That'd be great. But nonetheless, this is a theme throughout the Bible. It's a theme throughout our lives. Things can be peace and safety, and then suddenly not. At the same time, things can seem really out of control, and then suddenly things come into peace. I think it's interesting that it is extraordinarily rare in the Bible where God tells somebody what's going to happen later. The future is largely left to him. There's some prophecies, there's some really generic things, vague things that we might know about, but he's largely speaking left the future completely dark to us. I think it's because we're very poor managers of that information. I really do. If I know what's going to happen, what do I tend to do?
I tell.
You tell? Okay,
Tell
that's
somebody else.
fascinating. All right. I would try to manipulate it, change it to be in my self-interest, things like that. Where God knows that if he's the only one who knows the future on a moment-to-moment basis, who's the only one who can change it? Him.
He is.
Yeah. So it's an interesting way that he maintains providence over his creation.
But you also have, or some of us, I think you'd have this feeling, what can I do to help protect myself or my family or whatever? You have this
Preparation.
Get ready for it. What do I do to get prepared?
It's also interesting you bring that up, because preparation would be better than trying to avoid it. Like, for example, when God went to Noah and told him, build an ark because the flood's coming, there wasn't a conversation. If you notice, if you read Genesis chapter 6, God shows up, tells Noah what to do, and then Noah just gets to work. Like, there's no conversation. Noah never responds.
I need a sign first.
Right. He can't stop the flood, but he can warn people, and he tried. We know that. He can build a boat. He did that. So preparation is the proper response. Now, if it's something like, I'm going to die on this day in this way, which, by the way, happened to King Hezekiah in the Old Testament. God told him, you're going to die. Well, what did King Hezekiah do? He prayed to the Lord and said, I don't have an heir. Please don't let me die yet. Give me an heir. And God said, it's not a good idea. Now imagine somebody telling you that. God telling you, it's not a good idea you have a child. There's a theme in fathers throughout the Old Testament. There's a lot of bad dads in the Old Testament. King David, every single one of his sons was a scoundrel. There wasn't an exception. Some of them were murderers and adulterers like he was. One of them raped his own sister. And you think about Adam and Eve, that didn't work out so hot with Cain. There's so many examples of bad dads. And
Bad women.
there's bad women too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the reason why I bring this up is because we can't trust in men. That's the key lesson here. And that's what we always, if there's anything I can fall into, anybody can fall into, my children fall into, is that you start believing men's promises instead of trusting in the Word of God on a daily basis. It's so easy to do. Thankfully, we have an alternative. I don't know what people do without Jesus. I don't know what people do without his word. All right. Any other thoughts?
I've heard on this topic people say that the world's supposed to be at peace at this time and people wouldn't expect Jesus to come back at that time. Is that anywhere accurate? Or I guess it's like peace on earth around is what I've
Well,
heard.
one of the things Jesus says, it'll be like the days of Noah when he returns.
Mhm.
Well, how many people were faithful to God by the time the ark came?
8.
8.
Yeah, his family, that's it.
8. Now, if you want to go with that interpretation, you would think, well, he's not going to come back right now, because there's more than that, at least as far as we know. There's more than 8 in this room, right? All right, we're good. So you could, if you want to go with that interpretation, but there might be a problem with that interpretation. That interpretation is we are thinking we know better than when he's coming. And I don't like that, because even Jesus says he doesn't know the day or the hour. So
Yeah.
I don't want to be presumptuous as to when he's coming back. He'll come back when the Father tells him to, and not a minute later or a minute sooner. And so when it comes to signs and portents and things like that, I tend to be very bearish. I'm not going to pretend like I know. Does that make sense? I used to be a lot more bullish. I used to think that, yeah, okay, we could put all these things together and get some kind of really general approximation. Nah, no, I'm not going there. That's an endless mistake, I think. I think the book of Revelation makes a good case that we're in the final days. You know, I think the New Testament makes that point, but that's just the age of the church, so that's pretty generic.
I don't think we wanna know.
No, we don't.
We
I don't have any
I don't
idea
think
how
we
long
wanna
the
know.
flood day gonna be.
Yeah, I don't have any. And you know what's funny? As I age, I'm more content not knowing things. I used to want to know everything, and now as I age, I'm like, I don't want to know. Like I used to want to know what was going on in pop culture, and I wanted to know what was on television, and I wanted to know all the latest stuff. Now I'm perfectly content not knowing any of it. You know, there's so much worthless information. That's something I tell my kids. Like, you can fill your head with garbage. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be evil. It's just worthless. It doesn't have any value. It's like if all you ate all day long was iceberg lettuce or peanut butter. You know? Yeah, just worthless. All right. I'm the preacher, Linda. Okay. Verses 4.
I'm one of the cooks.
Yeah, I'm going to pay for that one. Yeah.
Peanut butter pie next week.
A George Washington Carver lunch where everything's made from peanuts. Yeah, all right. I've been threatened with that
And
multiple
you don't know
times.
what Linda might put in that food.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Just realize peanuts will result in my going to see Jesus early. So, all right, very good. Verses 4 through 6. Anybody?
But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night or of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober.
Okay, thank you. So Linda brought up earlier that you can be prepared, and that's precisely correct. In fact, we say that all the time in church, right? We don't know when Jesus is coming, but we need to be ready. So what are some ways we can be ready? This is a good way to end our discussion because it's 5 till. What are some ways we can be ready? Like this person, like he's using the illustration of a thief in the night. How might you be ready for such an event?
Be a fruitful Christian.
Yep. Be doing the work of God. Not just be a hearer, but a doer. Yep. What else? How else can we be ready? And I was thinking about in like also in terms of like this illustration of being ready for a thief in your house. You know, and this sounds like an irreverent analogy, but you have insurance for stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you shouldn't put yourself in harm's way for things. Like I tell my kids that all the time. You know, Lane one time, he said, well, somebody tries to take my car, I'm going to shoot him. I'm like, no. You know, and that's how a 16-year-old thinks, right? Granted. But as you age, you realize that it's never worth putting somebody's life at risk for a thing. That's what you have insurance for. In business, you teach your employees, if somebody comes in to raid the cash register, just give it to them.
Give it to them.
Don't put yourself at risk. You know, these stories that come out where this hero saved the store because they overtook the thief. That guy put his life at risk.
Yeah.
For
They told us at the bank, do not ever.
Don't be a hero.
Whatever they want, give it to them.
Yeah.
Don't argue, don't.
It's not the movies.
Yeah.
Offer to carry it out for.
Well, let me give you something that goes along with that. Just like you wouldn't put your life or other people's life, you wouldn't exchange that for a thing. I think all the same, we shouldn't try to save ourselves. That's what Jesus does. I know people who drive themselves crazy thinking that every little wrong thing they think or do is going to put them in hell. That's what grace is for. That's what the cross of Christ is for, is so we can let go of that shame and that guilt and we can live fully for Him. If you're worried about every time, because let me tell you something, you're a human being and I am too. We're all going to do things wrong occasionally. Jesus forgave you. If He didn't, you met the wrong Jesus. Do you think the Apostle Paul wandered around every single day just moping and sad and pessimistic and driving himself crazy? No, he was busy with the mission of God. And he constantly talks about the grace of God applying to his life. It's not because he was being dismissive of what he did wrong, but he wasn't going to drive himself crazy over it either. You know, you meet the same thing with married couples, and I think this is a good illustration because we're told we're the bride of Christ. You can see married couples who walk on eggshells around each other. That's miserable. Now, of course there's rules in marriage and boundaries in relationships. Of course there are. But if that's all you're focused on, you're going to have a miserable marriage. It probably won't last. If you don't enjoy each other's company, if there's not fun, if there's not peace, none of that rule following is going to do you a bit of good. And so I think the same thing is true here, where we're not sons of darkness, we're sons of the day, as the verse says there. I bask in the light of Christ. I enjoy the peace and the relief of shame and guilt He gives me. I don't take it for granted, not a bit. But at the same time, am I going to beat myself up and flog myself like crazy every time I make a mistake? No. That's what He's there for. So don't try to be your own insurance policy is my recommendation. I know people who do that, and well-meaning, well-intentioned, God-loving Christians who drive themselves and everybody they love batty because they are rule followers. And again, nothing wrong with being a rule follower. But in fact, it was funny. I had a friend who was a really intense rule follower, drove her husband crazy. And this was several years ago. And her water broke and they had to get to the hospital. And she told him, "It's okay if you speed." And he looked at her like, "Did you just tell me I can speed?" Because she had always been such a stickler for rules. But what was the higher value in that case? The baby, getting saving the life, because she had complicated pregnancies in the past and she was worried about that. And they never stopped laughing about that. And so now he's always asking her, "Can I break this rule?" Now, of course, he's being funny. But the point is, it actually brought some joy to their life to realize that it's not all about the rules. That the rules, you might say there's a spirit of the law that's greater than the letter of the law. Even Jesus says that with the Sabbath, right? If you have a sheep that falls in a hole on the Sabbath, what's the greater value? It's the life of the sheep. Now, that's not an excuse to break rules. And you talk about this, and there's always somebody in the room who's like, "That just means people are going to..." No, it doesn't. Because Jesus makes this point. If anything, I've had to learn that reading the Bible and prayer should never be a burden, because God doesn't want it to be a burden. It should be a place where I find rest. Jesus is my shepherd. He lies me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Psalm 23. That has more meaning as I age. Let that be your regular state with the Lord. Because when the tragedy comes, you don't need yourself driving yourself crazy along with the tragedy. You need to find serenity in Jesus. All right.
Sometimes you have to bend the rule,
Occasionally,
keep them from breaking.
to keep them from breaking. All right, Virgil said it. And we were witnesses.
Got that down for recording.
Don't bend them too far.
What can we bend, Josh?
Yeah, we'll have a meeting later. We'll figure it out. The old youth minister bit of wisdom, which is not wise at all, is it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. But it's probably the best idea to ask for permission. And what I learned in youth ministry was the more creative I think I'm being, it's actually the more stupid I'm being. That's usually... Those two things have a direct proportionate relationship. So I told Alex some pretty crazy stories of youth minister friends of mine who did some really dumb things. A couple of them got fired.
I
So
went to one church, they had like a 20-year anniversary of their youth minister retiring, and one of the youth stood up and was like, "Oh, I'll never forget the time that we had youth group on the roof." I'm like, "What?" On the roof? That is not on my to-do list, by the way.
Oh, and I've had meetings with people where they've had this idea and they're all excited about it, and I'm like, I don't think so. And they think I'm being a party pooper or something. Like, no, I'm pretty sure that if something happened, the insurance company would never believe us. Like, you can't go there. And I get it, you know. People want to still think it's the 70s when you could do anything, but it's not anymore, especially with other people's kids. So they don't understand when they come home in 4 pieces. You just can't do that anymore. All right. Well, it's time. So, Larry, would you close us out in prayer?
Our dear Heavenly Father, again, we come to you in prayer, asking that you be with all those that couldn't make it today. Be with those that are sick and in nursing homes, and give them rest according to you. Pray that you be with our loved ones, where they might be, protect and guide them also. We ask, Lord, that you be with those in the community that need our special prayers. May they see Christ through us. We now ask everything in Christ's precious name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Wave bye to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love
All
you
right.
guys.
See you later.